Former President Trump's fate is in the hands of 12 regular people, the jury. What could the jury instructions be in this case, and what effect could they have? What questions will they be asked? What instructions is the judge likely to give at the end of the case? You have no idea how critical that can be for the jury when they try to solve this puzzle. At the beginning of the case, the judge gave some instructions to the jury and explained, here's how this works. They're going to give an opening statement. Those aren't evidence. Witness testimony is evidence. He tried to sort all of that out, and that's very important to the jury. And then there's going to be what's called the jury charge, where at some point he will say, all right, here are the definitions. This is what the law says, and here are the questions. You just don't listen to all this, go back and say, all right, is he guilty or innocent? There are actually questions you have to answer, and sometimes they have elements, right? Considering these 5 things, do you find that these 5 elements were proven? And if they were, you must answer yes, and if they weren't, you must answer no. And we don't know what those are yet.
That's right. So the jury instructions or charge are a really critical part of the trial that people don't think about, and sometimes even attorneys don't really pay that much attention to them, but they are what the jury has to sit there and look at when they go back into the jury room. And they literally, it's like their book to live by. So a good attorney will look at those ahead of time and literally, before the case even starts, write an outline of their closing argument and make a list for all the things that they know the jury is going to have to look at the end, and make sure that they hit that in all of their evidence coming through during the trial. It really is the guide for the attorneys and then for the jury at the end.
Well, one of the things we always did in preparing witnesses from a trial science side is we tried our best to figure out what those instructions were going to be, what the elements were, what questions were going to be asked. In big cases, they would bring in the appellate lawyers to argue the charge at the end of the case. We would meet with them at the beginning of the case and say, what's the most likely charge and what are the most likely questions going to be when you argue this at the end? And we would get those phrases, those terms, those elements, and we would prepare every witness to use that terminology in their answers. We would get those lawyers to use those terms in their questions, to use those terms when they were cross-examining someone, when they were asking their own witnesses. We would put those terms and those elements in our graphics. So when they got back to the jury room, they would say, wow, that's what they've been talking about the whole time. It's on all their graphics. That's what their witnesses talk about. That's what the terms their lawyers have been using. That's what they've been presenting the entire time.
Yeah.
And if the other side didn't do that, then it was all over our case and not all over theirs. So that's what I mean about paying attention to the jury. The jury. What are they going to be asked at the end? And put your case in that picture frame and present it to them in that way so they understand it when they get back there.
Yeah, helping them do their job, because the job back in the jury room is actually quite difficult. Taking the law, especially for people who aren't used to reading legalese and trying to understand actually how it applies. So if you've kind of been going through it, making it familiar to them throughout the whole trial, when they get back, they're like, oh yeah, I'm comfortable with this. I can do this. I see it. It's not this strange foreign language to me. Yeah,
it's just psycholinguistics. You're teaching them to see that world through the filter that you've set up for them, and they get comfortable with that and then understand it. You want them to understand. You don't want confusion, you want clarity.
Right.
This is such an important case. I would have a team of people in there if I was working on this, watching that jury. We oftentimes would have a mirror jury in the courtroom that matched every one of the jurors in the box. If there were 5 women and 7 men, we would have 5 women and 7 men in the gallery that matched them as closely as we could. And we would talk to them and say, what do you understand? What's clear to you? What are you confused about? And that would inform what we would focus on the next day of trial until we got clarity, clarity, clarity. And in a case this important, I don't think you leave anything to chance. And based on what I'm seeing, I think there may have been some help, but I think there underestimating the importance of the jury here. It's all about the jury at this point.
It literally comes down to the jury. People think that the judge is the one that decides the case or has all the power. The judge just decides the sentence when it's all over.
Yeah.
But what happens is up to the jury.
The real closing argument, as we've said, doesn't happen in the courtroom. How's it going to happen in this case with 2 lawyers on the panel, a manager, and a lot of people that are used to speaking up?